Hello, I've got a couple of phrases I'd like us to consider. The first one comes from the title above verse 34 of today's reading, and it says, The Way of the Cross. The second one is, Walk in the Way of Blessing. I think they both mean roughly the same anyway, but my thought is, which is more understandable to people who are outside the church? For many church folk, saying the way of the cross has a certain rigour about it and a depth. It has a truth to it, but I think it's something that today's generation will consider fairly irrelevant. It will be beyond them. I greatly believe that Jesus' message, not his message, but his actual love and his acceptance, his caring about people today, whatever their background, whatever my background, is perfectly relevant. And it is for today's generation as much as it was for yesterday's. But if I speak of the walking the way of blessing, I think folk will warm to this concept more. I feel it seems to be a bit more acceptable to them. I particularly like the idea of the walk. It seems to ring truth with my knowledge of the Bible. It reminds me of Jesus walking with the disciples by the sea, and it reminds me of God walking with Adam in the garden. It's something that I can do. It's something I understand, and I will have done it already today. It also suggests a continual progressive, an ongoing. It's a good way to have a relationship. To walk with Jesus is okay. I'm concerned that sometimes we seem to be very irrelevant. And I don't think that our church language helps very much either. We need to show our concern about the worries that folk have. That's the virus right now. For many people, it's actually bills. It's feeding the family. It's also climate, the climate crisis and plastic pollution. All these things are relevant to today's world. This is what today's younger generation are caring about. It's what they want to hear about. This is where they need the voice of God to speak. And we speak of justification and sanctification that are important, but if inacceptable due to perceived irrelevancy, they're never going to become a benefit. God cares for the poor. He cares for the rich. He cares for the world itself. And he made them all. He made us all. We and they are in his image. We are loved and they are loved and we are accepted. He made the world and he loves that. Paying the bills and feeding the family is an obvious, desperate need for people right now. And we should respond to that. Maybe we could donate to the Salvation Army. But a consideration for climate and plastic change is necessary because it's actually making poorer people across the world poorer still. And God doesn't want that. And so he's concerned about climate and plastics, just as today's generation are concerned about that as well. And they perceive God as irrelevant. But in actual fact, can you see the massive common ground we've got there? And the church speaks of justification. And the generations, they're not even saying, what? They're just not even listening anymore. And yet we have so much common ground that we need to act on together. Christians should be about prayer. They should be about prayer and the Bible, but not the Bible for knowledge's sake, but the Bible as fuel to empower our concerns, to show us what God cares about, to feed our prayers, to make us more caring, to help us feed the hungry, to care about the world, to share God's care about the world, about the climate, about plastics and other things. But prayers that are now relevant to today's generation. We're never going to speak about salvation to this generation until we can speak words that they will hear or even understand. We need to be holier to God, but we need to be more relevant to the folk around us. Walking in the way of blessing. Walking in the way of blessing. I kind of understand that. I think if we are seen to seek God's presence with the concerns that people on the street care about, then more people will come along with us. and that's their benefit. Jesus was the lesson of holiness on the streets. He walked the way of blessing, and he walked in a way that related to the people he lived amongst. He was relevant to them, and he spoke their words to God and with God. He was concerned about their worries, and they knew it because he lived with them. He was holiness down to earth, quite literally. To walk the way of blessing, prayer, more for the things the world worries about, and tell them you're praying. Bible reading. Start with the story of Jesus, written in the book of John near the end of the Bible, and hear of God's love. Feel God's love for the people today, for us, for you, for me, and know how he and we are concerned about the poor, and share this common ground that we have with the world. Walk the way of blessing. Do Jesus stuff, that we walk nearer to him, but we also walk with the cares of today's generation, so also nearer to them. We, if you like, we bridge the gap. That somehow, being light and salt, we communicate that God cares for what the world cares about. There is a common ground, and this is where we can meet people. So let's walk the way of blessing. Let's bridge that gap. For their blessing, for our blessing. For I think we both need it. Amen.